thought that I'd do a little story time with you guys today for a change. So grab a chai, because it's going to be a bit of a long one. And we're going to talk about the time that I lived in Istanbul, Turkey as an expat teaching English and my interactions with the Syrian refugee community in Istanbul. Moved to Istanbul around February 2013 and I came back I think February 2020, so just before COVID fully kicked in. And while I was there, this was the literal peak of the war in Syria, right next door to Turkey. And during that time period, I believe Turkey took in maybe 3.5 million Syrian refugees. And of course, while I was in Istanbul, I got to know a lot of Syrian refugees. I worked with some, I was friends with some, I got to know people from all different backgrounds of the Syrian community that had come to Turkey as refugees. And I just wanted to talk to you a little bit about my experience. In reality, I can probably make you a lot of different story times about different experiences within the Syrian community in Istanbul. But what I want to do today, I want to focus on the Syrian community as people and tell you about how some of them had to leave Turkey on boats. Some of them got visas to other countries. Some are still in Istanbul and some went back. Really important to discuss this at this point because when I lived in Turkey, I saw the Turkish nation take on 3.5 million refugees. I saw the good, the bad, the ugly, the right, the left, the everything. And now I'm watching it happen in the UK because we do have a refugee crisis and there are many different reasons for it. But we also have an issue where members of the British public have decided that these refugees are the issue. So I'm seeing the good, the bad and the ugly again. And I saw that in Turkey and I just thought it'd be really poignant to bring these two experiences together and share them with you. It's poignant to know that yes, the Turkish government took in 3.5 million Syrian refugees. Sounds wonderful on paper, doesn't it? But there was a reason for it. They received millions, if not billions of dollars in international funding for taking on these refugees. But I can tell you now, categorically, that funding was not passed down to the Syrian refugees. They were literally, if anything, given the very, very basics, and that money was pocketed by the government. However, a narrative was pushed out to nationalists that the Syrian refugees were receiving hundreds, if not thousands of dollars from the government. They were receiving housing. They were receiving jobs. They were going to get citizenship so they could vote for the government. All of these baseless rumors went around what I would call the Turkish right or the nationalistic Turks. But I got to witness with my own eyes what was really going on in the Syrian community. Every single Syrian refugee that I encountered in Istanbul had a different story, a different lived experience, and a different ideology. I met some Syrians that received absolutely nothing, living in broken down housing like squats. I don't know how to describe it. We don't have it in the UK. But in Istanbul, they have these things called overnight housing. That's how it's translated into English. And these are temporary little shanty town kind of hut houses made by hand that are just located on random streets. I've met families living in those that didn't even have a front door, that used a cloth over their front door, not one piece of furniture in that house. One of the young ladies from that house had cancer, but yet she had 2 small twin children. It was horrific to witness and heartbreaking. But then if I jump to the other side of the spectrum, I had highly educated, successful Syrian friends, people that had been engineers, teachers, business people. They had hotels, property, everything, and they lost absolutely everything, and ended up as refugees in Istanbul. I met many, many young men who had traveled on their own to Turkey, and the reason was their families only had gathered enough money to send one person out. The youngest, the fittest, the strongest, usually the men. And the plan was they could then work on getting money and opportunities to get their families out. And I saw that happen. A friend of mine was an engineer by trade, became a teacher in Istanbul, started a life there with a partner, but finally was able to manage to get his mother and I believe his sisters out of the war zone. But they couldn't stay in Istanbul. They could not find a way to stay. So they had to go to Europe. So this engineer had to leave his home, his relationship, his job, his new life, and get on a boat and cross that ocean to take his mother and sister that had no choice to Germany. And let me tell you now, he has German citizenship. He received it very, very quickly. He now gives back to the community as well as working. So do the rest of his family. And his success is amazing, not just for himself, but what he is returning to the German community. I have friends who are still in Istanbul and they have established successful careers. They now have Turkish citizenship. They travel around the world. They have restarted their lives. And I have other friends that decided to go back. They were all humans with lives, with lived experiences, with dreams and hopes, and they all had to choose a different path. Go back, stay in Turkey, move on. And I respected and understood all of their decisions. Won't deny is the fact that the Turkish government made a lot of money out of the refugee crisis, and that money was never passed on to the people of Turkey. Exactly the same as the UK. The UK government makes so much money out of war. It makes so much money out of the migrant crisis. Who do you think owns the hotels and the contracts to house and feed the migrants? The friends of the government, exactly the same as in Turkey. So the same way some of the nationalists in Turkey got angry is the same way that some of the nationalists in the UK are angry. But their anger was focused on the wrong people. Because of the greed of the Turkish government and because of the greed of the British government, I will honestly say some of the wrong people got in. In Istanbul, I had many of my Syrian friends explain to me that they've had to cross the border or be in spaces where there were people that they knew were responsible for killing members of their families, or people that they knew were criminals, or people that they knew were dangerous, but they couldn't say anything because they were vulnerable. They were in no position to call this out because they themselves are refugees. They themselves are in danger. Imagine the people that you are fleeing are right there next to you going through the border. And the same is happening in the UK. All right, I'm running out of time. I'm going to come back for a part 2 because this is really, really important.